So we are very fortunate to have with us Dr. Gonzalo de la Manza, who is a professor at the University of Los Lagos, which I looked up on Wikipedia, which I understand is the main branch of the university is in Osorno. So I don't know whether Osorno is where you live, Gonzalo, but certainly that is where the principal part of the university is based. He's a visiting professor at Harvard and the University of Lisbon, and was the director of the Popular Participation Secretariat of the Chilean Constitutional Convention between 2021 and 2022. And obviously for us as an organization, Unlock Democracy, which campaigns for a written constitution for the United Kingdom, we are particularly interested in that experience that you have had and that Chile has had, and to learn from that experience. Our second speaker, again, I'm very pleased that we have got with us. So Gonzalo is joining us from Chile. Norman is joining us from Ecuador. And Norman is the former editor of the political section of the Diario El Comercio de Quito, and was a member of the Ecuadorian National Assembly, campaigner for indigenous rights, Ecuadorian presidential candidate at one point, president of the governing council of the Galapagos Islands, Juris Doctor and university lecturer in constitutional law and state theory. I'm not sure which of those are all still current, but clearly Norman and Gonzalo have both had very extensive careers, both in academia and also from a political perspective. So the way the event is going to work, I'm going to kick off with a few questions about constitutional matters, and then we will throw it open to the audience for them to put questions. So we'll have questions coming into the Q&A, and then we will choose some of those to put to you, Gonzalo and Norman. So if I can perhaps just kick off with the first question, and that is, why and when does a country need a new constitution? So Gonzalo, can I put that to you first? So why does Chile need a new constitution? Now you're muted, Gonzalo, so you need to unmute yourself. I think maybe it's because you've got your headphones in. If you unplug your headphone, we can hear you now.
Microphone out.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
That's okay. No, it's a pleasure for me to participate with you in this interesting forum and activity of Unlock Democracy that I did not know previously. And I think to this question, I don't have a general answer. I don't have a comparative study about how and when, but can I speak from Chile, from Chilean experience, I might say that for us, Chile, a question of context. Chile has had in its independent life since 1818, some years after the independence, civil war, and then 2 or 3 constitutional essays. But in 1833, we have the first stable constitution, and this constitution was we have this constitution until 1925. In 1925, the society has absolutely changed. There are some new social sectors in place, working class, middle classes. It's the end of the oligarchic republic. And then we changed the constitution, not so much. It's a kind of conservative constitution, quite authoritarian, but anyway, there's a continuity. And this constitution from 1925 was in place until 1980, when the dictatorship, Pinochet, has the power to approve a new constitution for what he calls, or the government military dictatorship calls, democracia tutelada. I don't know how to say in English. It's a kind of protected democracy. No? Protegida, protected. Protected from what? Well, from the interest of the majority. That's the thing. That has in his terms the name of communism or demagogic politics or things like that. Well, that's all we have had, and in the last years, from the middle of 2010 and from 2016 till now, we have had three. He says we tried to make a new constitution and we failed. Then, if I can say, in Chile, the issue of a new constitution has constituted a political issue or relevant issue only in situations of crisis, of high crisis, specifically crisis with the decision-making process, insatisfaction and tensions and frictions about the way where the decisions are made. And additional, I think, the crisis that has have a relation with the relation between people and the state. The kind of citizenship we have. In the last years, the thing was, well, the military dictatorship we have an heritage and unwanted heritage of a constitution. The Chilean transitions does not make a new constitution as did Brazil or Argentina or other countries. And then this kind of constitution was a real limitation to make some changes in economic order, in political system, in many things. It's the last thing I will say is, it's always a good answer to say, well, we are in crisis, we need a new constitution. No, I think for us, clearly no, because very important demands and needs of the Chilean people and of the Chilean system and democracy was not enough to have a real new constitution. Probably it has had relation with there's a need of some conditions to make a good constitutional process, appropriate conditions to make a good deliberation and to go to a good success. And the other thing, it's not a magic solution. It's not it's a way to reorient the decisions, the processes, a new framework to decide. But this kind of change needs to have a strong support, and we, unfortunately, in my opinion, we need a new constitution. We need to go away, to go further this authoritarian constitution with some reforms that we have now. But 3 times we failed. We can speak after about why these efforts were not enough.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo. So thank you for setting out, as you say, Chile's numerous attempts at securing a new constitution, and highlighting that although there have been a series of crises in Chile, that hasn't actually led to the changes that people want to see, the majority might want to see in the constitution. So we might come to Norman now, and Norman, had the process was the reasons why a new constitution was needed in Ecuador different, and has Ecuador been more successful in its attempt to secure a new constitution? So Norman, over to you.
Thank you very much. You hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, thank you very much. I want to say hello to all the people is right now connected to the webinar, and thank you very much for Tom's invitation to participate. And glad to also to be here with Gonzalo de la Maza from Chile. An honor and a pleasure. Well, I just want to say that yeah, maybe Chile and Ecuador, we are Latin American countries, and we are part of a really a region that is had been involved since 1990 in a really interesting constitutional processes around many of the countries. No, it was not the case of Chile. Chile was connected to these constitutional processes with a lot of highly democratic expectatives recently. I can say that because by their is a result maybe of their own history, like the dictatorship of Pinochet was one of the strongest political system that hits a lot Chile and generates a really complex, unique process in Chile, no? So I think that it's really interesting to understand how this have been changed later as a result of the social processes that were in the back. But in the case of Ecuador, I agree with also with Gonzalo. There's some social, political, economical crisis that always push in Ecuador a constitutional process. And in the last night, close to maybe 30 years of the last democratic period of Ecuador, we started to generate some complex situation of political instability since 1990. We have just to remember that between 1995 and 2006, we have 10 or 11 presidents of the country. So this was really a mess. And we were in a lot of contradictions between a complex relation between the executive power and the legislative power. So this complex situation that was in the middle of it, we have to remember that in Ecuador, we turned to use the US dollar as a national currency in 2000 as a result of a deep and complex financial crisis in 1999 that pushes a lot of our Ecuadorians, a lot of people of our country to migrate to other places around the world. This was something that was a really complex situation that had been generated a lot of instability in Ecuador for many years. So as a result of this deep political crisis that in the back you have a financial crisis, an economic crisis, a social crisis, a big discussion around the need to generate more participatory presence of citizens in the accountability of what is the work of the public powers against corruption of them, and at the same time a complex situation with our rates of poverty and in the country generates like this constant process of pushing the idea that we have to rebuild the social contract in Ecuador. And this is part of some, we have to remember that Ecuador was, in 1998, we lived a constitutional assembly. In that moment, they called them a constitutional assembly in 1998. Because they established the constitutional assembly at the same time that the legislative power is still being in current functions. So both of them, we have a legislative power doing laws, and a constitutional assembly in 1998 doing a constitution. But later, in 2008, the constitution, the process of Ecuador was a full power constituent assembly. It means that they stopped the work of a decision of the National Assembly was to stop the work of the Legislative Assembly, and this is a consequence of all these years of pressure of trying to find a new social contract that could refund, in a way or another, the way was about how politics and how social and economics was being organized since the last return to democracy in 1978. So I want to just highlight that this was, I believe that the constitutional process of 2008 is a result of a deep crisis that came from 1990. Also, we have to understand that in the middle of it, there was a lot of presence of the indigenous movement as a political actor in the discussions around more or less participation of the private sector in the management of our natural resources, discussion about the plurinationality also, and other key issues for the country. And this crisis that started in the 1990 maybe is a result also of what had been happening in 1978 in the way we returned to democracy after a dictatorship of 9 years. So in the 70s. So what I'm trying to say is, yeah, there are some processes that have been take a long time, maybe not too much for the life of a country, but there's some conditions that we could call them like a crisis that generates this demand of the society to find a peace and democratic way of managing a deep conflict, social, economical, and political, that maybe if you don't create a tool like a constitutional assembly and a process like that, the resolution of the conflict could be in a more complicated situations using violence and the balance of powers in the society, but with a lot of people that could die in the middle of it. So it's like a democratic way of trying to find a solution to a deep crisis. I think that these conditions that in our countries, and understanding that around Colombia, Venezuela, and also Bolivia, since the 90s, they started a really also complicated and deep constituent processes that have been developed also as a result of a specific situation of these countries, but always linked with these needs of generate a more democratic processes that could balance also the economic situation between rich and power and poverty and poor people in our countries, and the way you're planning to manage these inequity conditions in our country. So this is some ideas that I want to put in the table. Thank you.
Thank you both. And I guess a question comes out of this, which is often put to us, perhaps as an organization, and that is, given that certainly in Chile, that there hasn't been, although there have been a series of crises which haven't led to a constitutional change, can you see in either of your countries or perhaps other countries in Latin America where a country could secure a new constitution without there being a crisis? Do you need a crisis to have any success of getting constitutional change? Because we campaign for constitutional change, but we don't necessarily want that there to be a crisis for it to happen. So can you do it without a crisis?
It's interesting. It's very interesting, this question. If we can see the three efforts we have had. The first effort was made by Presidenta Bachelet in 2016, and it was clearly a top-down proposal with a participatory component, with some very interesting process of local meetings, self-convocated local meetings. It's very interesting. But in the main thing was, we need a new constitution, and we need to find a way to do it. Then there was a proposal, very not quite radical, but and the alternatives to approve a new constitution was in hands of Congress, then to have the consensus of the political parties, and the alternatives was, well, the next legislature, the next Congress elected will have constituent faculties. No? The second is then the Congress could do it. The second was a constitutional assembly. That was the demand of the left, etc. And the third, that was the tradition in Chile, a commission, a group of experts, or something like that, that could elaborate this. Well, the political elites in Chile don't have consensus in relation with the crisis that was in the base of the problem. And they say, no, the diagnosis of Bachelet governments is wrong. The problem is not a constitution. We need some reforms, but that's not have a. And then they didn't give the approval to any of the ways. And the next in 2018 we have a right-wing government. Then they say it's not the problem. We don't talk much about it. Well, that was a situation where there's not a strong crisis, even if there are many symptoms of social mobilization, social disaffection, problems that have a link with the kind of constitution, very restrictive we have. But the elites don't give their consensus. There was not a constitutional process. And 2019, we have a strong social breakdown. I not how to say estallido. We talk about the estallido social, explosion, social explosion, and that was. And after the explosion, there was a very strong social deliberative processes, many meetings and proposals, and many people has reflect, and really we have a deliberation, a very wide deliberation process. But after a social explosion, with violence, with all the problems, in that moment, the right-wing parties has reflect and say, oh, probably we have had to be more open in 2016 and 17 with the project of Presidenta Bachelet, because this project was not so radical, and probably we will we will have prevent this kind of explosion. But they made some autocritic on that. Well, in this moment, we have had the crisis. And as an answer, as a response to this social explosion, the political system, the majority of the parties agree in the idea of change the constitution. We have had 30 years when the problem was not put in the agenda, or if they are put in the agenda, there was a rejection. And there was, in this moment, the hegemony, the relevance was in the social movements. The social movements put demands, their demands, etc. And at the same time, as we have, as in many countries, a strong problem in relation, in the relation between the people and the politics. Politics are seen as the worst thing, a source of corruption. People that in Chile, people talk about the political class as a social class. No? Politics are people that has its own interest. They don't work for us, etc., etc. Then the social movements put the candidates and has a good success in the election of the. Well, it was a great support to make a new constitution. At the same time, the social movements succeed in put their candidates. The failure was that there was a case on the mobilization and social explosion pushed for a change, and the political system answered with a, well, we could make a new constitution. The failure was due mainly to the lack of support of this progressive proposal that emerged from this Convención Constitucional that was supported by the social movements and the left-wing parties. But the problem is that there was a referendum at the end of the process, and that was with a mandatory vote. Then all people must vote, and we have 90% of people voting, and the initial referendum to put in to begin the process, and then the election of the candidates for the convention was not with mandatory vote. Then the people who vote at the end was not the same people that vote at the beginning. It's the double of people. No? We have had 50% of participation at the beginning, 43% of participation at the election of convencionales, and 90% of participation at the end. These people probably, surely, have not participated in demonstrations, have not probably participated in the social explosion, the majority of them, nor in previous electoral moments, included the referendum to put the process in movement. Then approve the idea of constitution. There's not an issue for them. For a great number of people, yes, but for the majority, really no. The third attempt was the reaction to that. It's the complete opposite. As the defeat of this proposal was the extreme right, a new party of the extreme right, the Republicanos, has the majority there, and fail again in popular support. They don't want a new constitution. They think that we are okay with the constitution we have. But at the same time, as they are a new player in political system, and at the same time, there was the more critic to the previous process, they have a very good result in the election, but the proposal they put in place was equally rejected. Then,
Sure. Thank you,
Then
Gonzalo. I think I need to come to Norman, so I'll give you a couple
okay,
minutes to finish,
okay.
but yeah.
Then I could say the crisis is it's in place, but there are some conditions and some things that consider before to say that there will be a good process to come to an end with a good outcome. But because without the crisis, well, the status quo said, oh, that's not important. With the crisis, we need to make a good process. Then I stop here. I have some problems that could I remark, but the next round.
Okay, thank you, Gonzalo. So Norman, would you like to comment on whether you do or don't need a crisis to secure a new constitution?
Well, the discussion is what we understand as a crisis, no? We in the case of Ecuador, we are incredible excited about politics, or we used to. I don't know right now what's going on, but I can say that traditionally people are, well, first of all, our vote is an obligation. Something important to understand. It's not an option. You need to go to vote because that's what the Constitution said and the law says. And if you don't go, you have to pay a sanction for that. So this one thing is important. The second thing is that we live politics with patience here in our countries. In the case of Ecuador, not everybody's like involved. Maybe everybody hate politics, but we in the deep part of our heart, you hate it or you love it, but with patience. And these make the people are really, in a way or another, I don't know right now, but it used to be something that maybe was important. No, something had been changed. When we work in the Constitution of 2008, it just started the social media in Ecuador, no, and it was not. It was recently, and many things changed since 2008. There was no TikTok, there was no Twitter, there was not. I remember there was you got Facebook, and maybe Hi-Fi, also, no, that's the older social media. But many things have changed since.
Chilean was the first constitutional process with social media,
Yeah. So many things have been changing. I remember that our participatory process was linked with blogs in that moment, no, as a way of communication in a more efficient way with the people. But there's no Twitter in that moment, and WhatsApp, it doesn't exist. Everybody was using Blackberries in that moment. So okay, so some things that we need to understand of how complex situations have been changing in a radical way with technology and social media. But it's important also to say that crises it depends how each country defines their own crisis and their own moments, no? I'm just want to make a comment and having a lot of respect around the history of the UK and what's going on right now with Europe. But Brexit was a crisis, for sure. Right now, maybe it's a reality, or maybe people is trying to say, well, we have to turn over the page. But maybe the crisis is there, and no one is having a deep learning of what's going on for the future about something that will still not process it in a deep way. Maybe the status quo of each country is saying that things are going in the best way, but maybe the crisis is there. Migration is a crisis. I don't know. I just was thinking loud. But in the back of it, there's a deep discussion of how each society defines their own crisis. Sometimes, as Gonzalo said, the elite say there's no crisis. And in a moment that you never know, something happened and the crisis was there, but it exploded. in a way that you never understand it too much. And you say, oh, now we have troubles. What we can do? So the big question is, and this is the difficult issues around how politics in practice works. How you really try to generate a more democratic balance processes of this of building like a new vision for your country for the next 15 years, and trying to do it in a more rational way, or trying to build something that goes like you're riding a horse, no? So this is something that is difficult to set, believe me, because it depends on each country. But in the back of it, always the constitutional processes try to answer to some lack of maybe of democracy, some specific conditions that needs an answer, and you wanted to do it in a transparent and democratic way. That will be something important. But in the back of it, also I have to say that something that is one of the complex things to define is how who is going to do the change, or what is the institutional framework that's going to be involved in the process. It's going to be the Congress in our cases, or the national assemblies, a constitutional national assembly. It's going to be the parliament. It's going to, traditionally in my country, just for an example, was very in other constitutional changes, they create like what we call una comisión de notables, a elite commission of people. What I can say, some of these big heads of women or men that have a clear idea of the state, the law, the constitution. So the president gave them the commitment to build a proposal. Let's do why you don't do a new constitution? And then we take the constitution and we put it in an election. If the president like it, the result of the work of the commission, you never know. So these bright and great minds thinking the constitution, it was a way of doing the constitutional change. But in the case of Ecuador, everybody in that moment that wanted to call the constitutional powers, the constituent powers, sorry, proceso constituyente, the constituent process, it's quite different, no? It's not the same. So, and people was tired of giving this kind of delegation to these big thinkers, no? That were designated by some high corporations, no, in our societies. So, but this is because people was pushing something is going on. There was some sense of we really want to reorganize what things have been doing in the back 30 years. So it's really interesting. This just to say something, no, the case of United States, when they built the Constitution in 1776. They called it was the home of the brave and the land of the free. But they never fixed it or decided something about the abolition of esclavism. Esclavitud, of, how to say that in English? Esclavitud, mi querido Gonzalo. ¿Cómo se diría?
Slavery.
Slavery, yeah.
Sorry, of slavery. They didn't do it. 100 years later, there was a civil war. And they decided to abolish them. And 100 years later, Rosa Parks was trying to go to the university in a bus. And there's a famous song that is called Strange Fruits Hanging on the Trees. I remember from Billie Holiday. And maybe close to 60 years later, you have the problem with Floyd. You can see that there, is something that was not fixed from the beginning of the foundation of the country. And something is going to be had to be fixed in the future for sure. I don't know if it have to be a constitutional change or not or whatever, but something is going on there. So this is part of this of the thoughts that maybe sometimes are in the back of these processes, no? And each country have to decide, yeah, what is the big issue that you want to face, and to understand what is the way you have your own measure of your own crises, no? To see how you can manage it and what's the best way of doing it. This is really, really important. And and one of the other complex things are that what is going to be the electoral system that you're going to use it to define, for example, who is going to be a delegate on this process or not. This is the back. I think that this is a big issue too at the same time, and was a big issue in all the constitutional process that we had been living the last years, no?
Sure. Thank you very much, Norman. We're going to come to some of the questions. So a few questions about Chile. So was the text that was put to the Chilean people, perhaps the progressive text, was it too ambitious in terms of what it was trying to achieve? Gonzalo?
Probably it was the Convención Constitucional lead by the representation of social movements has the problem that is so ambitious, but at the same time, it's not enough articulate around one or two or three things. Somebody asks sometimes, well, this constitution is the constitution of what? Spanish constitution in the 78 was the transition constitution, no? To ending the franquismo and go away. And this is what kind of constitution is? Clearly, it's the constitution of rights, of social rights, but the issues in the deliberation was not the social rights. And in the deliberation, in the public discussion, the issues that the opponents put in place for reject the constitution was not the social rights, but was the way that some delegates made some things that was quite wild, I don't know, or things like the first was the housing. Chile has a strong housing programs, and many people has their houses built by the state. And there was a campaign that was saying, they will, voy a perder mi casa, me van a quitar mi casa.
I'm going to lose my house. Someone is going to take it.
I will lose my house. The government will take my house. This is nothing to do with the real constitution we are discussing. This is one thing. As a constitution has a lot of articles and say things about many issues, then we have different ways you can support, and at the same time you could reject or make campaign against. And that's what our problem. And we need to decide about the whole thing. There was a proposal to make some intermediate referendums about things that has support in the assembly, but not enough support. No? That was intermediate. Then there was a proposition that says, well, do some intermediate referendums to Solta. Well, the right-wing parties don't want nothing about it. Then they say, no, it was an authoritarian idea. Well, if you see the results, probably that could be a good way to resolve some things with the popular point of view, and then after that, don't go to the all or nothing that is a referendum about that. But the problem is that, let me say in a synthetical way, for the 50% of people that was involved in the process in different ways, in social demonstrations, they have voted for delegates and they approve a new constitution. The idea of a new constitution was approved by 80% of the people. But these people was the half of the people that vote at the end. Then the other half was much less politicized, and they were quite sensible to some campaigns, etc. Then the problem is there that in that sense it's quite ambitious and it's not clear for the people that was the main things. And this is a problem for the social movements, because the social movements in politics, when act in politics, they need to make some priorities, and they don't know how to do that. Politics are experts on that. Well, try to make an agreement, and this agreement has the social movements in the assembly, in the convention, they interchange things. You support me in that, I support you in that. Well, we have all the things, marvelous things, but we don't have a strong issue, 2 or 3 things that could make a broad consensus, a broad social majority. And you need to add to that the media, the mass media, are absolutely favorable, opposite to the new constitution. That was very related with the right in Chile and the economic main groups. Then we have a campaign that in this situation has effect.
Yeah.
Thank you, Norman.
Yeah, so I just want to say that, yeah, I had been reading a little bit of the reflections, really interesting reflections that are going on the chats. And yeah, I think that the constitution could be a useful tool when you need to put in a real clear way, and even if you put it there, will be conflicts, believe me, to say what could be the limits of the power. What are the procedures that they have to recognize, to take some kind of decisions, and how it could be like some important improvements between the relation of the Bill of Rights, that is the first part of the Constitution, of the writing constitutions, and the organic, not organic, it looks very, it sounds very vegan, but in English, but is the part of how you organize the power, no? In Spanish we say la parte dogmática y la parte orgánica, and in English I don't know how to say it exactly, but the how you organize the power to develop the Bill of Rights in practice. Maybe this could be an example. So it's a really complex, what they say, a very complex constitutional engineer process to see how you can develop this, and it could be useful to understand where could be the limits that the political powers have. In our case, we have a presidential system. In the case of Ecuador, no, but you also elected by vote a president, and you elect a legislative power too. is quite different about the parliament system that you have in the UK. But in practice, in practice, you have to it's really interesting to have a writing constitution and it's useful to try to define this balance in a more clear way and try to see who could be like the guardian of this constitution. No, in the case of Ecuador, we have the Constitutional Court, for example, and have the power to say to the legislative power and also to the executive power, wait a minute, you are going forward in the use of your powers against some of the principles that are based in the Constitution. This is also useful in some cases, no? But I want to say, in the back of it, always there is like in our experience, and this is something that we learn also from some of the U.S. founders of the country, that it could be like like the utopia of the constitutional of constitutions, no? Trying to limit something that is unlimited, that is the political power. So always political power found ways of reorganize themselves to see how we can deal with that. At the end, also they will want to change the constitution because they don't answer to their needs. And it's complex to understand that democracy needs limits. And this is really interesting, no? And sometimes the constitutional constituent processes is something that it doesn't have limits because it's a full power process. So you have to understand really what are the limits and how far you want to go. So it's like it's a really interesting way to understand it, but also it could be really creative and really interesting to build this with the people and to understand exactly what they are searching for, and the process by itself generates a really democratic sense of commitment of that community that is like trying to be linked in a way that will like a better way of living around their own communities and country, no? So, but these some of the things that I think that is the complexity of this kind of process. But a writing constitution could be useful for these things, no? If you define with a clear way who is going to control also the way the constitution is going to be respected or not, no?
We've only got a couple more minutes, but just following up what you've said, Norman, do you think that it is possible to have a constitutional process that unites people? Chile has obviously had a process that didn't unite people, or at least didn't unite enough of them behind the new constitution. So what do you need to have to get people on board? Is it about the people who are part of the Constitutional Assembly and the role that they play and the position they adopt? But how can you ensure that the process is one that is positive as opposed to polarizing?
There is a big question, but I believe that something that is really complex is to understand that in the participatory process, how you can also generate like a pedagogic strategy of help to our society to understand that first of all, you want to be part of a community of people, that you want to live together with that people, and that you have to do the effort to trying to find like some balance between all your expectatives and trying to understand that maybe your the full of your demands not necessarily going to be faced in a constitutional text, and you have to negotiate this with your neighborhoods with the people where you are living to understand that we want to live together and in peace and give opportunity to all of us in the best way we can do it. So it's really the way you build this. Believe me, I think that trying to be a kind of critical in the way our society is organized around social media, the way how we have been maybe as a result of this way of polarizing our thoughts and opinions in the social media. Our societies are kind of trivialized, maybe, no? We just hear or we just talk with those who really think as us. We don't want to connect dialogue. So this is a complex situation. So I will like and I will love to try to understand in a better way how you build a constitutional process under these new circumstances that changes a lot day by day. So this is a challenge. It really is a big question, and will be really interested to understand democracy under these new perspectives. No.
Yeah. Yes, I think how to stop social media polarizing, it would be a completely other webinar, which would probably be a very long one. So, Gonzalo, would you like the last word?
Oh, no, the last word. But I think a couple of things. If it has relation with the idea how to involve in a kind of so complex problem, if the needs, the perceived needs of the people, of the majority of people are quite urgent, the problem are specific, the things are you need to resolve now, you need better public policies, not a new constitution. Because of a problem, simply of a problem of time. For doing that, for trying to obtain a good text, a clear, something that is makes sense to the majority of people, you need time. You need participation, you need time, you need negotiate, go up and go down, etc. It's important to have some relation between this body of full power as delegates with the existing consensus. You need to change, but at the same time, you need some support from the existing political system. And at the same time, to try, I agree completely with Norman about this. The kind of process you need to put in place is not so simply, especially in that times where the collective things seems that the collective themes, the issues seems that are not important. My life is going for my own way, and I have my worries about the rest of the people is about security, about migration, about threats, things like that. In this context, this is not possible to do it. You need to find a way if you want a sustainable process at the same time. The constitutional, the other side is a constitution for 50 years, not for tomorrow only. That's the way. I don't imagine a country that lives without a constitution as the United Kingdom, a right constitution, because we are we came from the Napoleonic Code and everything must be right, etc. But at the same time, we have problems with the deliberation over complex things, sustainable things, and strategic things. And that's, I think it's a problem for all the countries, not for Chile only. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you both. Thank you for joining us from Chile, Gonzalo, and Norman from Ecuador. You've obviously had much more experience of writing constitutions than we have had in the United Kingdom in recent centuries. So I'm sorry there were a number of questions in the Q&A that we didn't get to, but I think people will have heard in some detail, some very useful detail about your experiences and the challenges that you have faced in your respective countries in trying to secure a new constitution. So I've certainly found it very, very illuminating. And again, we're very grateful to you for joining us from the other side of the world for this webinar. So thank you, and I hope to see you again. And good night to everyone on the call. Thank you.